Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report, and in this programme today we'll be marking the 107th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, and yet still today the Turkish government refuses to acknowledge its role in the greatest genocide committed against Christians in history. Well, welcome to the programme, and we have a very special guest today to discuss the Armenian Genocide. His name is Rafik Sarkissian, and he's a leader within the Armenian community in the UK. So, Rafik, it's been a few years, but I'm so pleased that you could come on the programme as we're marking the 107th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, which is the biggest genocide against Christians in history.
Pleasure is mine, thank you.
Pleasure. And can you just share something about your wonderful heritage, as the Armenian people are a very special people. Armenia as a country is a very, very special country as well. And knowing that you are the first Christian nation for the gospel to be, when the gospel was spread and adopted by the Roman Empire, Constantine. So you've got a great heritage, a great spiritual heritage, and you're a very special people.
Yeah, Armenians were the first state to accept or to adopt Christianity in 301 AD. And they have since been very dedicated to delivering the gospel and to follow the Christianity principles and to deliver and develop relationship with their neighbors and do as much as possible to promote Christianity. We've had thousands of churches built across the land, and there is, wherever you go in that area, in the Caucasus, there is evidence of our presence, which goes back to thousands of years. Some years back, we celebrated the 1700th anniversary of Christianity as well, and we had quite a few interesting events going. Having said that, the history of Armenian nation and Armenia has been quite turbulent, based on the crossroad of West and East. It has been an area that has had several invasions from neighboring countries, and more recently, and especially in the 20th century, has had the worst experience. We lost independence for about 600 years. Having gained independence in 1918, it didn't last long. It lasted only about 2 years, and due to Turkish aggression, the situation was worsening and it was getting quite desperate, and therefore Armenia chose to become a Soviet state and joined the Soviet Union at the time. Since 1990, and since it became independent again for a second time, there's been a lot of effort to develop the country. There's been a lot of effort to promote democracy. It probably is the most democratic nation in the region, in the Caucasus. And that also has created some level of difficulty, because the neighboring countries, unfortunately, are not as democratic, and Armenia has suffered as a result. We have the neighboring enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh in Armenian, which goes back for thousands of years in history, and the evidence is there in many forms. However, Turkey and Azerbaijan claim that that is an Azeri state or Azeri land, and it should be returned to them. And as you know, going back nearly 2 years now, we had the 44-day war, and as a result, over 5,000 of young Armenians lost their lives in the war. The war wasn't between Azerbaijan and Armenia only. Turkey joined the effort with Azerbaijan, and using Bayraktars and all the other means available to them, they actually caused a lot of casualties and destroyed a lot of the lands, and now they are in process of destroying the churches and the evidence of us being there. And they claim that they are not Armenian, whereas all the engraving, all the crosses, what we call khachkar, are evident of thousands of years of Armenian history.
Tragic, and we'll be discussing a bit of that later on the programme. But Rafi, how did you personally become involved politically in defending and bringing awareness to the plight of the Armenian, particularly as this programme marks and is marking the 107th anniversary of the horrendous genocide that took place by the Ottoman Turks against the Armenian people during the First World War?
Well, I was born in Iran, and since young ages, especially during high school time, I joined the youth movement, Armenian Youth Federation, and we were active organizing various events, social events, etc. Then I moved to UK when I was 21, and after a couple of years settling down, etc., I again started with some friends a youth movement at the time, a scouting and sports association called Ottoman Armenian Scouts. And from there we developed into other activities, again the Armenian Youth Federation, which had several members, and organizing events. Following that, I joined the Armenian National Committee of UK, and our purpose essentially is to promote Armenian rights and human rights and the recognition of the Armenian Genocide and protection of the Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh people's rights to self-determination and to independence, what they are actually pursuing. And that way I've joined also the Armenian Community Council, and my friend Armand Abramian, who's the chairman. We've worked really hard together with the rest of the councillors to pursue this cause and to help the community to organize various events and try and do as much as possible to persuade the UK government to accept the fact that what happened in 1915 to 1917 was actually a genocide.
And as of this recording, your community has just taken part in the Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day that occurred on the 24th of April that marked the 107th anniversary. Share with us the significance of this date for the nation of Armenia and for your community, and why specifically the 24th of April?
Well, 24th of April is definitely a symbolic and a specific date. That is when the Ottoman Empire and the Young Turks government started their plan of annihilation of the entire Armenian population. I should say the Christian population, because it wasn't just Armenians, it was Assyrians, it was Greek Cypriots and Greeks, Pontic Greeks, and partly also Jews. Although Jews were lucky at the time, and especially the Jewish community of Yozgat managed to suddenly be freed of that plan based on agreements that they reached with the government at the time. So the significance of 24th of April is essentially based on the fact that that day was when the government started the arrest of all the leadership of Armenian community in Constantinople or current-day Istanbul, and basically take them to their death. They took them to various locations and dealt with them by killing them. And that way, basically, they removed the leadership, and they could then do what they wanted with the rest of the population. It was a very organized effort, and the perpetration was done by various military and other groups that were sent to specific towns and regions to gather all the Armenians, separate the men, take them away and kill them, and the women and elderly and children were sent on to march towards the deserts of Syria. Absolutely horrific, where 1.5 million Armenians and
as you say, Assyrians and Greek Christians were murdered during that horrendous genocidal campaign on behalf of the Turkish government 100 years ago. Rafik, can you just share with us the ideology of almost like this ethnic genocide that was committed by the Young Turks, who were ruling the Ottoman Empire at the time of the outbreak of the First World War?
The ideology developed in the Young Turks, the leadership, and it became very clear gradually that their aim was to rid the country of the Christians, which obviously included the Armenians and Assyrians and Greek Cypriots, not forgetting that later on they then turned on to Kurds as well, and it goes into the 1900s as well, the efforts that they made to try and get rid of as many Kurds as they can. The significance of this is essentially racist, and the aim is to create a Turkic region that spans from, let's say, Constantinople all the way to Asia. And if we look at the map, then we'll see that Turkey and Azerbaijan are the path. Obviously, they won't be able to do much to Iran because that's a big nation as well, and it will be quite a complicated picture. But Armenia being in the center of the path or the way has become an issue. And although they used various excuses to justify what they did, saying the Armenians joined in the war effort with Russians against the Turks, which is all lies, they're just making up stories. Armenians didn't have a significant army at the time. Armenians didn't have the numbers to be able to, let's say, fight against the Turks. And it would have been a pointless effort even if they attempted. So all that story that they come up with in order to muddy the waters and try and confuse people is an effort to basically hide their guilt and to put the guilt onto Armenians. They're spending millions and millions of dollars to run their campaigns and to publish books and set up Turkish Historical Society that comes up with all sorts of unreal historical so-called facts in order to comply with the government's aims. It is a sad case, and there are a lot of Turkish people, and there were at the time also a lot of righteous Turkish and Muslim people that took Armenians into their protection. So it's not something that we could blame the Turkish people for, but it's certainly a policy that the government pursues, and it comes from the Young Turks time and has developed until now, and Erdogan is following the same aims. It was a very painful experience for Armenians to learn following the Azerbaijan-Armenia war that Erdogan expressed explicitly that these people don't learn in not at precisely the same terms, but they don't realize that we can complete the plan that was perpetrated on them at the time of 1915, obviously.
That's
so
horrific.
An expression like that, and then for him to try and suggest that we're trying to be friends with the Armenians and we're trying to make up and so on, and they apologize without saying why, what for, it's all pointless. It doesn't really mean anything when an expression of that nature follows.
Yeah. And Rafik, can you just explain for our viewers watching the horrendous, deplorable methods that the Young Turks pursued in order to carry out the genocide? Because I remember doing a program with you a few years ago, particularly to mark the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. And there is a direct correlation between the Armenian Genocide and the final solution, as many of the same tactics were deployed by the Nazis. And you know, the Germans played a major role then in being in the same war on the same side as the Ottoman Turks. So can you share with us some of the deplorable methods that the Young Turks deployed in order to wipe out the Christian population of the Ottoman Empire?
Yes, the methods were varied and all sorts. There were sporadic killings. It's also, I think, important to mention that the Armenian genocide wasn't suddenly a genocide. It didn't happen suddenly. It starts from late 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s, where in various regions in Turkey, hundreds of thousands of Armenians are killed in various forms. There is a very interesting book that was published on this, and several regions, and there is one incident that I think 300,000 Armenians were killed in that at the time. But this is prior to Young Turks. However, with the Young Turks and when the genocide started, essentially their plan was to gather Armenians from various regions, and I believe the regions that are considered are roughly about 80. Different towns, different localities, etc. So obviously men were separated and taken away. Some of them were used in military efforts, in digging roads and preparing things, and then later killed. Some were killed sporadically wherever they could. They were thrown into rivers, they were thrown off the cliffs, they were burned, they were put in caves, and they were smoked to death, basically taking the oxygen away from the cave by putting fires on. And they were raped, they were all sorts. Children were taken away and Islamized, women were taken away and Islamized. A lot of them died out of hunger and dehydration in the deserts. So it's all sorts. So if you take the cave and the smoke inhalation and death, you could compare that to the gas chambers and all sorts of other killings.
Well, would you also say that the Germans were complicit in this, primarily because you had German observers working with the Turkish military because they were allies together in the First World War against the British
Indeed,
and against
yes.
the French?
Yes.
So how much also can we level responsibility for the Germans in being complicit in the Armenian genocide for their failure to put pressure on the Young Turks to stop this horrendous ethnic cleansing? I mean, the First World War was bad enough, we all know that, but to actually commit a mass genocide, the biggest genocide against Christians in history, under the premise of the First World War, is something that needs to be called out.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it does need a bit of research, although some research has been done, and there are pictures of Turkish military leaders that later on work with Kemal Atatürk as well. And there are also pictures of killed Armenians and the German officers standing by the Turkish officers as well. So their participation is definitely there. In what way, it's very difficult to quantify. There would certainly be an advisory role, if not others. I don't think we have evidence of Germans killing Armenians. I wouldn't go that far at all. However, their participation is certainly proved. There is no doubt about that, in one way or another. And also, we should also mention Armin Wenger, who was a German missionary, and he took an enormous amount of evidence pictures that has been used later to prove the fact that, you know, this is not just killings here and there, this is an organized effort.
And also there's a very important Hollywood film called The Promise that tells this story of the Armenian genocide, which
Indeed,
if you haven't watched it, it's definitely worth watching. Rafi, can you share with us how many Armenians survived the genocide in which 1.5 million Christians were murdered at the hands of the Ottoman Turks?
Well, the population of Armenians in Ottoman Turkey is estimated to be about between 2 to 2.2 million. Although the Turkish official record says 1.5 million or 1.8 million, which is not true because there is a discrepancy between the records, and the Armenian church records are far more reliable than that of the Turkish state at the time. So let's say if it was 2.2 million. The rest would have either stayed and taken safety somewhere, refuge somewhere, and some would have fled. A lot fled into Armenia proper, and there is that history and the population that now lives in Armenia as well. And they also have their concerns, and they are also looking for justice as well. And a lot were saved by either French or other ships and taken to France, for example. A lot crossed the border into Arabic states. As you know, we have a big community in Lebanon, Syria, and other regions, Kuwait, and etc., also Iraq. And that way, I would say something of the order of 400,000 to 500,000 would have survived. Yeah.
Sad, really, really sad. And today, why is it 107 years after the Ottoman Turks initiated the Armenian Genocide, has there never been a full, heartfelt apology and recognition on behalf of the Turkish government for what their ancestors did with the formation of the Ottoman Empire against the Armenians and other Christians, and also, which is also essential, is reparations for the Armenian community, for the survivors, and just share with us the hurt and the pain that this has caused, because it's cast a dark shadow over your community for the past century, hasn't it?
Yes, that is a significant issue. And it's an issue not for just Armenians, it's an issue for the world. Let's for a moment imagine that someone or a community or people said we don't recognize the Holocaust. How would the Jewish people feel? It's the same analogy for Armenian genocide, because although Armenians weren't as many in the destruction, and we can't compare in terms of quantity, but in terms of the principle of genocide or annihilation of people or Holocaust, it's the same principle. And at that point it becomes equal. The second element which is important is that the methods used, although complex in the case of the Holocaust, but simple in the case of the Armenian genocide, they are very similar. There are at least 5 similarities of how it was done. Taking people away in wagons, concentration camps or camps in deserts. And this is a good example to show in terms of the aftermath of the genocide. This is 1,500 orphans that Near East Relief managed to get together in the deserts near Halep, I believe. And this is Syria. And that screams as to what happened. In other words, where are the parents? Why would I have, or what would then be, 1,500 orphans gathered together? So the fact that the Armenian population was sent away from Turkey is definitely there. The proof is there. The fact that men were separated and killed is there in many forms. And the women, some were taken away and Islamized, and some managed to survive. And that is where the survivors come from, basically. And the fact that to come out of a trauma like that and to try and establish life elsewhere is quite a complex process. And it took several years for the various communities, wherever, to organize themselves to get to a level that they can become a proper community and perform and contribute to the country that they live in. So the importance of recognition has a significant impact on the Armenian people because, and this is the critical point, that Armenia and Turkey are neighbors. And as long as Turkey denies that they did what they did, there are the possibility that Turkey can repeat the same effort on either Armenians or on others. And there are clear evidence that they've done so on Kurds, and who says that in the future they won't repeat the same thing. And also, if the opportunity arises, and we realized what happened during the Azerbaijani-Turkey war, no one said anything. They continued doing what they wanted, and the West was quiet, and the East was quiet. Even Russia was quiet. However, when Ukraine war happened, everyone started jumping and taking action and putting various means of restrictions on Russia and so on. So why this difference? And the reason is because Turkey feels comfortable, Turkey feels content with the fact that he has United Kingdom, he has Germany, he has America as their allies, obviously part of the UN, and part of NATO, and as a result, they feel that they can do what they want. Now, if genocide isn't recognized, why would Armenians try and make friendship with Turkey? I'm not saying with Turkish people, but why would they try and make friendship with Turkey? Because all that dilemma and all that worry is hanging on their heads. That unless you recognize what you've done, I can't rely on you.
Also, I think if we look back historically, there's probably a big historical opportunity missed with the formation of NATO in the late 1940s, that when Turkey joined, I think in 52, that there wasn't put in place a condition that if Turkey becomes part of NATO, then you have to recognise the Armenian Genocide and make war reparations and issue a heartfelt apology if you want to be part of the West. Sadly, that was lacking. But why has it taken so long for so many Western governments to recognise the Armenian Genocide and calling out the Turkish government? Because, this is the biggest genocide that has been committed against your community, but the biggest genocide ever committed against Christians in history.
The main reasons are two. One, that Turkey became an ally of the United Kingdom and also United States when the Habsburgs were at war and so on, and the situation during the war was very complex, and United Kingdom was trying to seek the means of having the upper hand. And it was very difficult at the time. And becoming allies with Turkey gave them that upper hand. So politically at the time, the situation was for Turkey. It was in their advantage. In terms of joining the United Nations, at the time the campaign for recognition of Armenian genocide wasn't really there. We were still trying to get organized and recover from the trauma. So had the effort been there, it might have had an effect. Difficult to judge that, but certainly not. However, during and after the genocide, United Kingdom actually made a declaration that this was a crime against humanity. And I wish they would have pursued that further.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at this excellent CBN news report. This is entitled Erasing History, the Genocide Turkey Prefers You Forgot.
About 1.5 million Christians were killed in what is now eastern Turkey during World War I. Armenians claim it was part of a deliberate policy of genocide ordered by the Ottoman Turk government. Turkey has denied the charge.
Сегодня для всего армянского народа день скорби, день воспоминания геноцида 1915 года. Это тяжелый день, но я сегодня рад, что народ помнит и будет помнить во все времена.
20 countries, including Germany, Sweden, Russia, and Canada, recognized the acts in 1915 as genocide. 43 U.S. states had done so as well.
And it's time that Turkey took a responsibility and just acknowledged their role. in the Armenian Genocide, and the biggest genocide against Christians committed in history, with the taking of over 1.5 million lives during the First World War. Rafi, can you just share with us some of the international campaign that the Armenian community have undertaken really over the decades to raise this to governments and also public consciousness, the history of what happened with the Armenian Genocide, particularly as you have a very powerful community in the United States?
Yes, on the 50th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, the whole process starts essentially from there. The Armenian people in Armenia, this is Soviet Armenia now, decided that enough is enough and they need to voice their concerns about the lack of recognition of the Armenian Genocide. And they came out marching, and the memorial Tsitsernagabert was built, that was shown in the clip. And at the same time, the communities in the diaspora got organized and started campaigning for recognition. So the effort was started from more in the Middle East and gradually developed into Europe and United States. There were various committees and organizations set up, and they were working in various ways and various means to pursue it. And gradually then the Armenian National Committee was formed, which is an international setup with offices in different countries. And they follow a clear agenda of protection of human rights, recognition of the Armenian Genocide, and helping Armenia to become more democratic and have established reasonable relationship with neighbors and so on. So essentially it's a socio-political setup. And obviously, because being a political case rather than a historic issue at the moment, because historically it's proven, the International Association of Genocide Scholars recognized it. The chair of the association also wrote a letter at the time to the president of Turkey explaining that the realities are these and it needs to be acknowledged, but nothing came back. And so on. We've had International Association of Genocide Scholar conferences where I've spoken, as well as many other far more renowned people and judges have spoken, and the fact of the genocide stands. However, Turkey continues to deny. Over time, we managed to secure recognition by various countries, by European Union, by various humanitarian organizations. At the moment, I believe it's nearing 30 countries that recognize it, and last year Biden's government also officially recognized it, and prior to that, during Trump's government, the Senate recognized it as well. So if it wasn't true, then why would all these countries recognize it? In the UK, we made an effort, and the Edinburgh City Council recognized it in 2005. And prior to that, 2015, and prior to that, 2010, Ealing Borough Council also recognized it officially. We have a memorial tree at Ealing that every year we hold a ceremony there as well. So it's been quite a challenging political campaign to try and convince politicians, and particularly the foreign officers of each government, that the stance that they take towards Turkey, by trying to hide the reality of the genocide and use other terms to refer to it, is the wrong means and the wrong way to keep Turkey happy. And recognizing genocide, like, for example, France did in 2012, is not going to affect the relations between the two countries. Okay, Turkey and obviously the political leadership of Turkey won't be happy to come to terms with the fact that other countries are recognizing it and they are in a denial. However, after a while, they have to maintain and develop their relationship. And actually, if you look at the figures in terms of the international trade, following the recognition of each country, the trade between each country and Turkey has increased rather than decreased. So what are we talking about? To give in to Turkish pressure by any country is a weakness of that country. But to accept responsibility by Turkey actually is saying that Turkey is prepared and responsible and is prepared to deal with any mistakes or wrongs that they've done in the past, and move towards a more democratic and more acceptable type of government.
And Rafi, before we talk about the historic moment when Joe Biden, the US president, recognized the Armenian genocide in April of 2021, can you share with us the dirty tricks that the Turkish government have deployed over the decades in order to prevent the truth being told, in order to get Western nations to recognize the Armenian genocide? I mean, for example, take the film The Promise. Now, that took decades to be made because of the way that the Turkish government were putting pressure on Hollywood not to make that film. And when the film The Promise finally came out, they made a replica film, obviously with less millions of pounds, to attack that narrative that was in that film. So it shows me that they'll go to any lengths to hide their crimes and not recognise the Armenian genocide and the genocide committed against Christians as any rightful democratic nation should do.
Right. They go to all sorts of means. They spend millions and billions on this. And that also shows that there is a reason why they do that. If they weren't guilty, then why would you go into all this length and spend all that money? Give you a very simple example. The first International Association of Genocide Scholars held their conference at Nottingham Trent University. When I found out about it, and it was in 2015, I said that I would like to present a paper, not a scholar, but obviously I have done quite a lot of research on the genocide and so on. So I put down the scenario as to what I would like to do as a proposal and send it to the organizers, and they accepted it. And I started working on the paper. It took me about 3 months to prepare it. The closing date was done and dusted, and everyone that was participating, I believe it was about 40 scholars that participated, including Henry King, one of the judges at the Hague trial. Actually, he spoke just after me, or just before me. Then suddenly, just a couple of weeks before the conference date, the program came with a Turkish military historian speaking right after me. So what does that say? If the closing date is gone, he wasn't there, and then suddenly it appears, it implies very clearly that Turkish government has found out about it through the embassy, and they've applied to the university, probably donated money or done whatever they've done, and persuaded them to include the historian, so-called historian, in there, who tried to negate what I had said and come up with all sorts of excuses to say that it wasn't a genocide. Firstly, I don't have an issue with anyone saying anything. It's a democratic country. They want to say something, by all means. But the way it's done, and the way it's influenced, rather than let the process work the way it should work, it implies that they are using every means. Another example that I've been personally involved in, the campaign that we ran with Edinburgh City Council to recognize the genocide in 2015. We attended the session. We were given the chance to talk about why we would like them to recognize it, and a few of our members did make presentations, including one that his parents were genocide survivors, partly, and partly were killed in the genocide, and he was a resident of Edinburgh. Again, Turkish embassy had persuaded the council that the Turkish community needs to have a say as well. Fine, we didn't have any reservations, but they tried to persuade the council not to recognize it. But the council, in majority, in clear majority, that is a very clear majority, recognized it. Only one party held back and didn't vote for it. Now, coming to 2016, the following year, we weren't involved. We weren't campaigning the council at all. Turkish embassy referred to the council and the council leader at the time, saying that you need to reverse your motion on this and basically deny that that was a case and negate it. And the council sent a response back saying that our decision remains as is, and it's down to you to seek reparation and reconciliation with the Armenian people. So those are just simple two examples, but there is a huge amount of effort being put through the embassies and through various establishments to publish untrue, made-up stories about history, to try and suggest that what happened wasn't a genocide, it was unfortunate, it was during the war, etc. But the truth is very different. Even Turkish historians know it, even Turkish people acknowledge it, and they join us in Turkey in commemoration events. And at some point, Turkey has to build up the courage to face the history and face the fact.
Well, let's look at this news item from CBN that looks at President Joe Biden's recognition of the Armenian genocide committed by the Ottoman Turks over 107 years ago.
For years, the White House recognized Armenian Remembrance Day while avoiding the term genocide, mainly to steer clear of potentially alienating Turkey, a NATO ally. But the White House statement said, each year on this day, we remember the lives of all those who died in the Ottoman-era Armenian genocide and recommit ourselves to preventing such an atrocity from ever again occurring. American Armenians hailed the decision they see as long overdue.
We worked very hard to see America recognize the Armenian genocide, and so this is a new beginning for us. I feel it's a new beginning for my children.
On Twitter, Turkey's foreign minister condemned the declaration, writing, "Words cannot change or rewrite history," and Turkey entirely rejects it. Beginning in April 1915, Ottoman authorities deported, massacred, or marched to death 1.5 million Armenians in the first mass extermination of the 20th century. Turkey doesn't deny the deaths from that era, yet refuses to call it genocide. The government maintains the death toll is inflated, and it all resulted from civil unrest. Here in Jerusalem's Old City, the Armenian Quarter reminds us of this community's rich Christian heritage. Still, constant reminders like this poster signify the scars and memories the genocide left on Armenians here in Jerusalem and around the world. During a ceremony in Armenia, Armenia's Prime Minister called Biden's statement a powerful step on the way to acknowledging the truth. The White House announcement will likely cast a chilling impact on U.S.-Turkish relations. Its foreign ministry said it would open a deep wound that undermines mutual trust and friendship, and Turkey summoned the U.S. ambassador to protest President Biden's decision. For now, though, Armenians worldwide feel an historic injustice is being righted.
Finally, there we see that the American government had the courage to recognise the Armenian genocide, much to Turkish displeasure. Can you just tell us what this means for the Armenian community and the Armenian nation in the Caucasus to have that American recognition finally of the Ottoman Turks' role in committing this genocide?
Yes, Simon. The American recognition, and particularly in terms of Biden's government, is significant. It's significant because America, being one of the strongest nation and the strongest nation in the world, it counts. The influence that it has on Turkey, it counts. The bases that it has on Turkey, it has. The influence on the NATO and the general current-day politics, especially the turbulent political region in the world that we're experiencing at the moment. So American recognition is quite important. It also encourages us to pursue the cause even further, because if you consider the Western world as such, and even go to South America or go to other regions, there are several countries and significant countries that have accepted the reality of genocide. Not having America part of that, neighboring with Canada that recognized it several years ago, or the South American countries that have recognized it, it meant quite a lot for us, and there was a huge amount of campaign being run in America to try and get that recognition. The campaign was run by Armenian National Committee and by Armenian Assembly, and if you look at the amount of effort that we've put in that, going back probably over 20 years, is significant. And it's taken very small steps at a time to get to where we got now. So for us, it's a big win. And for Turkey, it's also an alarm call that your denial isn't really helping anything. You have to come to terms at some point and accept the fact. And they have enough evidence. The evidence is published everywhere, even published by Turkish historians. So what else do they need? If the people know that that was the case, and there's a population of Armenians in Turkey, and there's an effort to try and be as normal in being part of a Turkish nation and nation building and contributing to the country, all that doesn't mean anything if the genocide isn't recognized, because there is that huge question mark in everyone's mind: what is going to happen next? And it's a truth that Armenians have contributed to Turkish life. There were over 140 civil servants in Turkey at the time, 1915 this is, and prior to that, 1914. There is a huge amount of Armenian architecture in Turkey, designed and built by Armenian architects. There is churches, there is all sorts of things. So come to terms with the reality, accept a responsibility, and then look for reparation, and then hopefully at some point we can become friends, we can become people that can work together.
Absolutely. And also very important for our UK viewers as well, particularly since we're based in London. What has been the reaction of the British government and the Foreign Office in relation to recognising the Armenian genocide?
Yeah. In the earlier days of our campaign, the Foreign Office was adamant to accept anything. So they were simply saying that there were events during the war and some Armenians were killed. We are sorry about that, but we don't agree that that was a genocide. Basically, that was it. But then gradually, as we campaigned and continued, and especially after Jeffrey Robertson did some research on the archives of the Foreign Office and proved the fact that there is enough evidence to call it a genocide, and wrote to the Foreign Office slightly changed their terms, and they became more apologetic in their expression, but still continued to deny that it was a genocide. They won't call that as genocide. They won't use the term at all. And they suggest that it's an issue that the legal structure or legal system needs to deal with rather than a government, which is not the case. Unfortunately, legal structures aren't as reliable as one would expect them, especially in the European Union sense. And also the responsibility and the fact of history is related to government. It's in the government records. It's not in the legal records. And it's enough to persuade the government, as it has persuaded so many others, to accept the fact. If a local authority can be convinced, why shouldn't a government be convinced? They are the same people at the end of the day, the same political parties at the end of the day. So we will continue, and hopefully we will get to the level that the government in the UK will accept that as well. But what far more important is our role in the process. And I would urge everyone that they should write to their MP, they should encourage them to find out about the Armenian genocide and to try and persuade the government to recognize it. There has been representations by various members of parliament. Tim Lawton, chair of the all-party Armenian parliamentary group, proposed a private bill recently for recognition of the Armenian genocide. So that can be used as a means. Lady Caroline Cox, Baroness Cox, has presented at House of Lords. The retired Stephen Pound MP for North Ealing has done a representation at the parliament. So there is enough to go with. We are in the process of sending a complete history of the Armenian genocide. It's a 900-page book to several MPs, over almost 400, to help them to have a resource to refer to if they want to find out more. So I would encourage everyone to write to their MPs and pursue this cause and help us achieve the recognition in the UK.
No, absolutely. And to our viewers watching this program today, this didn't just happen to the Armenians. This happened to Assyrians. This happened to Greek Christians. Essentially, this was a genocide committed against Christians 100 years ago, including the precious Armenian community that's been fighting for justice for over a century now. So please do write to your political representatives, your local MP, and asking them to actually put pressure on the Foreign Office to recognise the Armenian genocide. This is such a difficult issue because it's gone on for over a century, and clearly your community and your nation want emotional closure on this, and it's so important that you get that emotional closure, because this is essential for your community to kind of move on, because what your community went through over 100 years ago during the First World War was absolutely horrific, and that's why it's so important today, and it has its scars even today, doesn't it, Rafi? And this is why it's imperative that that Christians pray for the Armenians and the Armenian nation, and to stand with the Armenian nation, but also to bring awareness to our political representatives in Parliament, to put pressure on our Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, to recognise the Armenian genocide, and to do something that is morally right and follow in the leadership of Joe Biden and the US administration in the States.
That's right. I think the message that we can think about is that had the Armenian genocide been recognized at the time and appropriate measures were taken to prevent it or to acknowledge it and to come up with a plan, when we talk about genocides now, we keep remembering, what do we remember? We remember the Holocaust, we remember the Rwandan genocide, we remember various others, and think about why do this happen? Why do the genocide happens? It's the ultimate crime. And how can we stop that? And the only way we can stop it is to prevent it and call the perpetrators to justice.
Absolutely.
That's the only way. And a good example to bring up is that had the Armenian genocide been recognized at the time and appropriate measures were taken, then it's very likely that the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. And the famous words of Hitler, that who remembers the Armenian, comes to mind as well.
And he said that to his officers just before they invaded Poland, and encouraged them to commit acts of genocide. And today we're seeing acts of genocide also being committed by the Russian forces in the Ukraine as a reminder of how we can't stay silent in the face of evil. Rafi, I just want to reinforce my friendship with you and the Armenian community, and on behalf of this programme, the Middle East Report, and I'm sure on behalf of Revelation TV as well, that we are fully behind all your diplomatic endeavours or your spiritual undertakings of not only highlighting this issue, but also getting justice done and reparations done, because I just feel this is so important, and that's why I'm so pleased that you could be my guest on this program today. So, please do let me know about forthcoming events and memorials that you're planning as well, and I'd like to make this a kind of yearly annual feature of the Middle East Reports, that we remember the Armenian genocide on the 24th of April every year.
Thank you very much, Simon. That has been a pleasure, and I'm really grateful for giving us the opportunity of presenting what happened to the Armenians and what we pursue now.
And Rafi, would you just like to say a message to our viewers? Your camera is there, so just look straight at the camera and just share them of why they need to pray, not only for the Armenians and the Armenian nation, but also to actually contact their local member of parliament regarding this, and to see what they can do to put pressure on the Foreign Office to recognise Turkish role in the Armenian genocide.
Okay, firstly, thank you all for watching and being with us. But most importantly, I think what we should consider is that what we're talking about today is about human rights, about the right of living and right of being productive as a nation, as people, and have the peace of mind that we're not going to be the subject of any persecution or massacres or annihilation. So primarily we are in support of human rights, and your efforts by writing to your MP and asking for the foreign office to review their position and to accept the fact of history is essential, and it's in protection of humanity, and it also will help to ensure that in future genocides do not happen. It's a preventive measure, and every individual has a role in it.
Rafi, I just want to thank you so much for being my special guest on the Middle East Report today, and I just pray that we do get the British government to change its mind and recognise the Armenian genocide. So thank you so much for being my guest today, and I pray that you get justice. And I want to thank our viewers for watching the Middle East Report today. The Armenian people are a very special people. Armenia is a very special country. It was the first Christian nation in history. Therefore, as Christians, we have a moral duty to stand with Armenia, to stand with the Armenian community across the globe in seeking justice and seeking recognition for the crimes against humanity committed by the Ottoman Turks over 107 years ago, and to put pressure on the Turkish government to recognise their historical role in this genocide and to seek forgiveness on behalf of the Armenian people. This is vital that we let our members of parliament know this, because we are standing not only up for the Armenian people, but for Christians caught up in the biggest genocide against Christians in history. So I want to thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.